welcome to another episode of Tech Build Network Conversations. In this episode, I'm joined by Emma Pollock, Fractional CTO and one of NI's most experienced technology leaders. Throughout this episode, we discuss how AI is having an impact on how teams are built and managed, and there's a load of insight shared into what makes a great leader in today's modern tech organization. Hope you enjoy. Let me know what you think. This morning, I'm joined by Emma Pollock. Hi, Emma. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Chris. Lovely to be here.
Brilliant. Emma, we'll jump straight in. So what I'm keen to understand is what have you been working on at the minute? What's currently taking up your time?
So, quite interestingly, what I'm working on at the minute is that I work as a fractional CTO. So for anyone who doesn't know what fractional CTOs do, we provide CTO level commitment and experience, but on a part-time or a shared basis across a number of organizations. And what's I think quite interesting is that in my current fractional role, I'm doing all the things that you would expect a CTO to do in terms of setting the technology strategy, the direction, leading the technology team, but I'm also actually heavily involved in the launch of a new business line in the company that I'm in. So I'm splitting my time across technology concerns and commercial concerns. The other thing that I'm doing right now is that this year I've come on board as a volunteer with the Northern Ireland Developers Conference. So I'm also helping to organise the 10th anniversary conference.
Very good. Brilliant. Can you share any info on the business line or on what you've been working on in that respect?
So it's quite interesting, right? So most of my career, I've worked in financial services. So I've done lots of different domains over time, but more than half of my career has been working in banks, with banks, for banks. This role is with an online pharmacy.
Cool.
Who do both what you normally would expect in your chemist, but like they have these kind of cool robots, to see the nerd in me here, that do pushing up of medications. So if you're on lots and lots of different medications, you know, lots of people will buy boxes and sort them out, or sometimes you can get your pharmacist to do it. We actually produce those in rolls. So you just wake up in the morning and go, these are my morning tablets and take them. These are my afternoon tablets and take them. And there have been some significant changes in the legislation in England. So it's an English company around electronic prescribing and also around how all of that can be fulfilled that have created a new business opportunity. It's quite interesting.
Amazing. Very good. And for those that don't know the NI Dev Conference, do you want to give us a bit about what it's about?
Who doesn't know the NI Dev Conference, Chris? For anyone who lives under a rock, NI Dev Conf is probably the biggest technology conference in Northern Ireland. So it's on the 21st of November this year. It is the kind of technology conference that is run by and for people who think going to a technology conference on a Saturday is a good time. Yeah. That's the best way I can describe it. So it's all by practitioners, talks from people who are on the ground, delivering all kinds of different talks about what's going on in their career, what problems have they been looking at, how are they securing things, what are they doing with AI. And last year there were more than 750 attendees. So 10th anniversary this year, we're definitely hoping to beat that.
Very good. Brilliant. To come back to Tech Build Network, this is all around building teams. Emma, what's been, I guess, in your opinion, the biggest change in how teams have been built in the last number of years?
It's kind of hard to answer this question without talking about AI. And I'm going to try as much as I can to avoid talking too much about AI today, right? Because it is brilliant. It does lots of stuff, but it's a tool. And like all tools, it amplifies what you're doing. So I think one of the biggest changes that I'm really seeing is much more talk about back to basics. So yes, there's some new things you need to learn to work with AI, but actually what's happening is that it's amplifying a lot of the fundamentals and the importance of the fundamentals. So things like great fun, right? Unit testing, test-driven development, discipline around branching, merging, knowing what's going into production. All of those things still matter, but when you start to move at pace, they matter even more. So the other thing I'm starting to see is that friction in coding, so the time it took to build things, used to be an idea filter. But now that filter isn't there. So we're having to think a little bit more, at least I am, about, you know, whether or not we should do things. So it used to be a lot of, can we do this? Now it's like, yeah, we can do it, but should we do it? Is it a good idea? And there's a lot of moving of constraints along the pipeline. So what's happening then is that if you can ship things faster, then you need to generate more ideas and have a better filter on your ideas upstream. But also when you ship things, how much change can your clients actually bear starts to become more of a conversation as well. So you never really used to have to think that hard about, are we changing things too fast, too much, too many times for our customers? That's also starting to become a thing that you have to think about that you didn't before. And then my kind of biggest bugbear on this is that there's actually no straight line that you can draw between the productivity of your engineering team and the success of your business. So I think what has happened is that there's always been this focus on, can the engineering team deliver? As AI is better applied in that space, I think you then have to really start thinking about, well, if your engineering supply was theoretically infinite, would your business be better? No,
Yeah,
it
that's a
wouldn't.
pretty good point. It's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah,
Obviously, in
and
the
I mean,
market,
look,
everyone's talking about 10x in and going faster, going quicker.
yeah, and when you put all of that together, right, in an engineering team, you've always had these kind of pressures, and again they're amplified. So we have this pressure of, can you ship more, can you deliver more, what can you do, and this kind of thing back and forward between product and engineering of, is this a good idea, should you do it? So you've got this pressure to speed up yourself, and to move closer to the business. So for teams, I think in an engineering space, that's the big change. The big change is you now need to be much, much closer to the business and how the business becomes successful. And then on the other side, I think AI has changed who can contribute to their code base. And I think that strong teams are starting to figure out, how can they safely accept contributions from more broad range of people across the business, while still holding the line of, just because you can get Claude to generate you some code does not make you an engineer.
Yeah, yeah, very good point. Emma, what's one belief, as a leader that you would hold that actually maybe you think others would disagree with?
So I don't think, Chris, that I hold a lot of controversial views about how you build a team. Like if you go to any technology conference or you read any articles, everybody's sort of saying the same thing. So I don't think that any of my views are particularly contrary. But what I do see a lot is that if you ask people, what makes a good team, what they will tell you and what they will do will not necessarily be the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So you'll see people say, I don't believe in rock stars, right? But then when someone resigns, they'll go, this person's a complete rock star, I can't live without them. You will see this, right? So I think that what I'm maybe contrary about is that everybody says that they want a diverse team, but it's actually very difficult to do in practice, and it's actually quite hard to get right. And nobody says out loud that when you put really genuinely strong and diverse people together, your team can actually perform worse for a period of time before it performs better, right? Because in my experience, properly diverse teams at the outset, there's friction, they fight, right?
Yeah.
They have differing and strongly held opinions that they're prepared to stand up for. That's what makes them really excellent contributors. But when you put all of that together,
Yeah.
Actually your job as a leader is quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of sitting there going like, are these guys ever going to get on? How can I teach them to value each other's opinions and to see each other's opinions as different tools that they can use together to solve a problem, instead of them pitting themselves against each other?
Yeah.
But for me, that I don't know that it's an ability, Chris. I think it's an unwillingness to give up on my team to actually solve that problem. has meant that I've built top performing teams using people that other leaders told me didn't have potential because they were maybe really, really strong on one dimension and needed to develop some other ones. And a little bit of that comes down to the person's willingness to develop, and a little bit of it comes down to your ability to coach as a leader. But a lot of it is about the team environment and that person being valued for the thing they're different from everyone else in, rather than being that difference being held up as a bad thing. And on more than one occasion in my career, I have had another, like a peer, come back to me and go, I don't know what you saw in that person, but I get it now.
Right, right. When you talk about that environment and you as a leader creating that environment, if you were to give advice to another leader who's maybe trying to get these people together and get them performing, is there anything you're going in your playbook that, oh, well, this is what I do, this is how the environment that I create?
I would say that having clear rules and responsibilities and good decision-making processes help, right? So if you're going to deliberately create a space where people can and should disagree, there needs to be a clear mechanism via which that disagreement gets resolved, right? So you can't throw a bunch of diverse people together and just go, you guys sort it out.
Yeah.
You have to be prepared to lead the difficult conversation and to help people to resolve it. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing I would say that I've found that works really well here is actually assigning a space when you make a decision to say these are parameters we're going to make a decision on, so that everybody sees that their input was put into the decision and valued, but also so that they can see everyone else's. So we would have done this actually quite successfully when I worked in Citibank, and we had 100 people, all very different personally, but also very culturally diverse. We had teams in America, UK, Israel, India, and across all of the different, and working on different parts of the platform. And one of the things that worked really well for us was we used to say, well, each team has a space in the decision making to put down their opinion, right, about each option, right? So if we pick option A, how does that impact you? If we pick option B, how does that impact you? So there was a space for each team to do that. And then there were some standard criteria that we agreed on when we chose from, and this was usually for like architecture and design decisions. And we would say, we prefer, not to change across 5 teams if we can change within 1. We prefer the simplest solution. We have some compliance constraints. So I think those are the things I would say, Chris, is that if you're going to create a really diverse team, you have to understand that your job is to create the structures that enable them to be successful.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I guess on the other side of that, Emma, from an engineering perspective, what do you think is maybe the biggest mistakes that first-time engineering leaders make in your experience?
On a continuing trend, Chris, I would say that the discomfort that you feel when you step into that first engineering role isn't a problem that you need to solve right away. It's really easy, right, to identify that what I was doing as an individual contributor that made me successful, I shouldn't do that anymore. And even, we're not going to talk about how many years, right, I've been working in the IT industry. Every time I take on a new job or a new project, there's like a little voice in my head going, what if this is the one that you can't do? What if it turns out like that horrible disaster that you had? So you have to kind of recognize that voice is trying to tell you something, but what it's telling you may or may not be useful. So I think that piece of, understanding that it's an uncomfortable transition and being able to kind of not make the discomfort go away, but understand exactly why it exists and address it is one important thing. And I think the people who can help you with that leads me into mistake number 2. So what I see a lot with first-time engineer or first-time leaders actually across the board is that when you step out of an individual contributor role to lead a team, and for a lot of people, the first time they do that, they step out of the team they were in to lead the team that they were in.
Yeah.
The people that you depend on for support, perspective, advice, and guidance, and all of those things, they're not necessarily now the people that you sit beside and work beside every day. You're now going to know things you can't discuss with your team. The power dynamic has changed, and the team will make it clear to you that that is the case. Every first time leader, or every leader, I suspect, will be able to tell you about how hurt they felt the first time the team arranged to go for lunch or pints without them. And they used to be invited and now they're not,
No, they're not.
because the team,
Child.
you are the leader of the team now.
Yeah.
Your role is different and the team see you as different, and that's okay. So I think that second thing is that a lot of the transition from individual contributor to leader happens and it's forced. The bit that doesn't happen unless you take a deliberate action is the building of that network. And not just your peers, right, in engineering leadership, but now thinking about, if you lead a development team, who can you make friends with who leads a QA team, so that you can better understand, when you work between development and QA, how their team works and how that works together. Who from project management can give you a perspective on what's difficult in project management and how can your team be a good team for project managers to work with. All of that kind of stuff, it doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, brilliant. Very good. Emma, for those that don't know, you've worked at the highest level across startups, scale-ups, global tech organizations. You've given us some insight on those already, but where's been the best environment, to put you on the spot, if you pick one, and,
All right, okay.
and why?
I don't know, Chris, that it was the best environment, but the best environment for me, right? And every single one of my roles has had something to recommend it, whether I enjoyed it or whether I didn't. And on average, I have been one of those irritating people that mostly enjoyed what they turned up to do. But the one where I had, I'm going to call it the most fun, was the Wombat NYSE environment. That was just a really good fit for me. And I think it really does speak to this kind of like, an environment that's good for me might not be good for you. So I know loads of people, right, who would, number one, never have accepted a job there. There were people when I took my job who went, Emma, what are you doing taking a job there? Have you heard like the stories about what it is that like how many hours they work? Kind of in the back of my head, I was like, I don't understand why you would be afraid of work. And what was so, I think for me, Chris, what was so interesting about it was the technology was really hard, right? We were doing things at scale and at speed that meant that there was always a steady stream of technology problems to be solved. The people that I worked with were unbelievable. And if you go and have a little bit of a dig around and you see where a lot of the people who came through that organization, particularly in the early kind of Wombat days through the startup, which I wasn't there for, but you see where all of those people have landed now, right? You have people who are at the most senior levels in global organizations. You have people running really successful companies. You have Lee Skillen and Alan Carson, who founded Cloudsmith,
yeah.
right? So in that organization, there was never a time that I walked into the room and went, well, I'm the smartest person in here. just never happened. And for me, I really enjoyed the pace and the challenge. And I was in a team that was really diverse, but really opinionated, where we could go into a room to have a discussion and actually have a fight about what the right way to do things was, and come out and go to the pub together and have a laugh about the fight that we just had, because we were actually properly a team. And I think that's the first time I'd really had that environment where I didn't have to censor anything that I was thinking or saying for the sake of someone else's feelings. They could accept that my opinion was my opinion. They may not have agreed with it. I might have had to shout a little bit to get people to listen to me, but they would listen.
Brilliant, amazing, very good. The next question is my favorite question, Emma. So this is ship happens. Ship. I said. So every technology leader is going to have a time when things didn't go to plan. So we call this ship happens. So when did ship happen for you?
I think, Chris, if you ask me when things went well versus when ship happened, I've got way more examples of when ship happened than when things went well.
Series in itself.
I think look, that to some extent becomes the job. So I had a really interesting one, that maybe wasn't the most stressful one that I ever had, but really had a big core learning in it. And that is that in one of my roles, we had this absolutely giant, right, big data Hadoop cluster, and we were processing like in excess of probably 5 to 6 billion pieces of information every day on it, which is a lot of information. It's less than the real-time stuff we would have done in NYSE, but like it's still a very large amount of information. And there were all these jobs that ran on the cluster. So we maybe had, did we have 100 jobs? We maybe did. And when we tried to draw the architecture of the system, I can remember having a conversation with the architect at the time, and we were playing like, let's guess when we get to the bottom of this, how many things are connected to and from this.
Okay.
And everyone else guessed 15. He and I were pessimists, so we guessed sort of 20 to 30. Turned out to be 70 when we got to the bottom of it. So just give you a bit of a sense of scale of the system that we were working with. And all the releases happened over the weekend. And we came in on Monday morning and the entire cluster had deadlocked and all the jobs had stopped running. And it transpired, I wasn't long in the organization when this happened. It transpired that when I asked, what the obvious question is like, what was released on Friday? In what order was it released? And how can we start to step through a rollback? The answer was, we don't know. There's no way to tell. At which point my stomach went a little bit like, you remember it, like I remember it clearly because I can see myself having a conversation like later in the day, and I can see exactly where I was in the office, and my boss and the architect were in the office that day. And I remember my boss going to me, Emma, what are we going to do? And me going, we can't go back. There's literally no way to go back. The only thing we can do is go forward from here. And we'll sort out all this release management stuff after, but we're going to have a conversation about that because this is not how we're going to be doing things going forward. We're not doing this anymore. And what we had to do was that all the jobs had a job scheduler. So the locks existed to make sure that no job would write data into the cluster at the same time as a job was reading data. But by happenstance of how the thing was built and correctly architected, all the write jobs were independent of all the read jobs. And there was a dependency ordering in how the jobs ran. So we had to pull the team of business analysts and get all the job ordering out of the production configurations and have them walk the tree of what order the jobs would run in to make sure that the run configuration made sure that all of the jobs that wrote data completed before all of the jobs that would read and use the data, so there would never be any partial reads, and turn off the read-write locks on the cluster and fall back on the job dependency ordering, because we had a regulatory commitment to complete the work on that data within a certain period of time of receiving it. So we couldn't stop, because if we stopped, we would have to notify the regulator that we had not met our obligations. So interestingly, Chris, at the time, right, I thought it was scary because it was, but it turns out that true fear is sitting on the front line of a cybersecurity incident.
Right.
So I think there's a bit of perspective, right? A little bit of perspective about how bad is bad. But it reinforces the thing that, look, we spent a lot of time doing this in other roles that I worked in. You can't fix what you don't know. So if you don't know what happened and it goes wrong, you can't fix it. And it goes back to this thing I'm talking about, AI, right? So if you think about release at the scale of 100, 150 humans, and now you think of release at the scale of agentic development and something like that happening, you can start to see this like, well, if you're going to speed up, right, the brakes on a Formula One car are better than the brakes on my Volvo.
Yes. Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. Very good. Emma, what advice would you give? You developed some great people over the years, but specifically in engineering. if you were speaking with an engineer who's maybe 5 years or 10 years into their career and they feel that they're stalled, they're not going anywhere, what advice would you give them?
There's lots of reasons this happens. Where I would start is looking outside of your immediate role and asking the question of how are you adding value to the business that you're in, right? So not just thinking about how much code can I write, am I the smartest or the best developer, but is what I am doing making this business a better and more successful place, right? And that can be lots of different things. It can be, am I helping and coaching my teammates? It can be, am I collaborating better and moving more close to product management so that I'm doing a better job of anticipating how the product's going to evolve so that I can make more forward thinking architecture choices. But really thinking about that, what is it that this organization values and how can I contribute more of that value? And there's a few mistakes that people make on the way that get them here. And I think one of them is measuring yourself on like how many lines of code or how many tickets rather than thinking about the importance of the tickets. Or in my case, my primary objective when I hit a production outage would have been to fix it without changing any code, because that was the quickest way to get everybody back up and running in production. Or in one instance, we had a client request for something that they wanted to pay for, but they didn't really want to pay very much money, and it was going to be quite complicated to develop. And I figured out that we had a bug in our code that we could turn into a feature.
Okay.
just as long as nobody ever fixed the bug. And actually, all I had to do in order for that customer to get that feature was update the documentation and add a comment in the code that said, "This bug is now upgraded to a feature. Please see ticket number, blah blah blah, and never fix this."
Very good.
Terrible, Chris.
Clever.
Right, but really thinking about, what is it that the outcome is, not just what the task is. And then what it usually comes down to is some combination of skills and mindset, right? So the mindset really is this kind of taking a look around you in this broader view about how can I be a more valuable contributor. And then the skills is that in a lot of cases, for lots of different reasons, soft skills development gets neglected for engineers, and that you can get so far on technical capability alone, but to start to step up and start to become a principal engineer or an architect or a team lead, you need to have this whole other set of skills around, how do you communicate with non-technical people? How do you lead teams? How do you prioritize and exercise your judgment to identify value?
Yeah.
So all of that, I think, is really what tends to happen. And the difference between, I think, people who break through and people who don't is, yes, I think some element of capability and skill and drive and everything else. But the other thing I think is it's willingness to take on assignments that are maybe not immediately obviously valuable to you, or that push you outside of your comfort zone and you really just don't know what it is that you're doing for a while. Because if you think about at the moment in my fractional role, I am literally, Chris, I spend a part of my week thinking about marketing plans, go to market activities, commercial models, right? And you could say, why is Emma doing that as a CTO? And why has she chosen to do that? Shouldn't she be spending her time off over here learning about these new technology concepts? And it is a balance. I do have to stay up to date on all of the technology stuff. But every time that I go after this to have a conversation with someone in marketing or someone in the commercial side of the business, my understanding of what they do and what they need from me is just going to be that little bit better because I spent a bit of time. I'm not going to say walking in their shoes, right? Because if I tried to walk, I would fall over. I genuinely do not. It's not a skill set I possess, but I am willing to roll my sleeves up and contribute.
Brilliant. And I'm sure that's really appreciated on their side then as well when you're having those interactions and conversations.
Yeah, and if I was given just one piece of advice that's actionable about what can you do, I would say find out how your company makes money. so that you can explain, to the extent that you can explain it to someone else, right? How is it that your company makes money and is successful? Because when I reflect back to a lot of the things that I did in NYSE, a lot of them were driven naturally because the culture there was that there was no distance between us as engineers and the customers. When I joined, Chris, a customer could phone me to my desk and yell at me if I had sent a bug into production.
Right, okay.
Engineers went on site, but what that meant was that every line of code I wrote, every single thing I did, I was acutely aware of who was going to be on the receiving end of it and what it was that they needed from me.
Brilliant, Emma. Very good. And our final question then to wrap things up today, this is probably more for your peers. What do you think, other engineering leaders, maybe one thing that they should be considering that they maybe aren't in their roles or their organizations today?
That's a really interesting question, Chris. I think with all of the progress that we've seen in AI, our teams are able to be more productive than they ever have been. I probably have two things in mind about that. And one is that as engineering leaders, as we shift closer to let's say to the business, it's easy now to think that building things is free. It's not free. And our responsibility to question why we're doing things and make sure that we're still doing the right things is something that we can't let it drop away now because you can simply write some code faster. Because even though the code is faster and you're AI assisted across all elements of the life cycle, the more complicated your system is, the more costly it is, and not just to build, but also to maintain. So I think really keeping keenly aware of that cost benefit equation and saying, should we be doing this? I think that's definitely one thing that leaders need to be paying a lot of attention to. I think the other thing to really start thinking about is if you could unlock more contributions from the rest of the organization, how would you do that? So instead of now starting to think about, oh, well, all these people are trying to contribute code, how do I stop them? Mm-hmm. Start thinking about how to actually do this safely, right? Because there's loads of different ways that you can do that. But the best example to look at is the open source community, right? Okay. The open source community allows anyone to propose a change. And we shouldn't be afraid of that.
Yes.
So I think those two things, right? Should we build it, and how can more people come in and contribute?
Right. Okay. Emma, thank you so much. It's really, really great insights there. I'm really, really grateful for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chris.